Hey guys, this is Zach. Welcome back to another one of my Guild Wars 2 videos. This time I want to talk about my impressions of the game so far during its beta phase, and what I feel is right with the game, and what I feel still needs a little work before it feels perfect. So first I'm going to talk about what I think is going swimmingly well with the game, and first up I think that the world, Tyria itself, feels amazingly detailed, and it's so pretty. I mean, there's no other word for it. It's just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous world. There's so much detail put into everything. Like, when I first started Queensdale, just looking around it looked great already, and then I walked over that bridge and it felt so epic. Just looking over to the right and seeing the dam, looking to the left, and seeing the environment around and all the little details that had gone into the bridge. It just felt amazing. And speaking of the environments feel completely steeped in lore and history. Like, you really feel that there's a story behind everything going on and everything that's in the world. You see this building, you see the architecture, you see the kinds of little nuances and how the streets are laid out and how the cities are built. You feel like they're there for a reason. And for people like me who are unfamiliar with the story, who haven't played Guild Wars 1 and don't really know too much about the lore, you don't feel like you're left out. You don't feel like you're excluded by all this history around you. You do actually feel like, I think what the developers intended, that you're a new character, that you've just been born into this world, and now is your chance to explore and to discover. Next, I want to talk about the questing. Now, questing really did feel fun and dynamic. Sometimes things just happened as you're walking by, but even when you get like set quests to do certain things, the way it's laid out on how you have a progress bar for the quest, and you don't have to do just one activity. You can do multiple activities. For example, the first quest I got in Queensdale was to help, I think, Farmer Ida, I forgot her name, but that farmer. And you didn't just have to, do one thing. You could water the crops, you could feed the cows, or I think they were cows. You could fight off bandits, you could destroy those worm things. And all of them contributed to the same progress bar. So you didn't feel like you were grinding the same task again and again. You could just do what you felt like. I feel like watering crops, so you water the crops. And when you feel like killing something, you go and kill something. And it all contributes to the quest, which is amazing. And one thing that really is nice is dynamic events during the quest. For example, when I was helping that farmer, bandits showed up trying to burn down the hay or whatever. And also, for example, when I was fighting those spiders in the orchard, suddenly a big spider showed up, or a large wave of spiders. Now, I'm not saying the game is completely free of grind. It is an MMORPG. It is a game. There needs to be some kind of, work involved to progress your character. But these kinds of little events break up the grind. And it doesn't feel like one big grind. It just feels like a collection of activities, which feels a lot more natural, a lot more comfortable, and it's harder to get bored of it. Then I want to talk about combat. Now, combat at first felt really awkward for me. I thought it was a bit, I just couldn't get the hang of it at first. So it's really hard to master and really hard to get used to it. But once I started playing the game for quite a few hours and I got used to the dodging mechanics and how hitting people worked and casting spells and abilities worked, I started to get the feeling that I was in control. Like, when I was screwing up before, it felt like it was my fault. It wasn't the game's fault that it was screwing up. It wasn't the mechanics that were broken. It was just me not good enough. And once you get used to the combat, you start to feel, because it feels like it's your fault when you screw up, it feels like it's your fault when you win too. Like, you really get the sense of excitement when you're under attack, when you're being ambushed and stuff like that. You get excited and you get really into the fight because you're in control of everything. If you can dodge something, you can dodge something, and then you feel like, I dodged that thing, and you feel amazing. It's really rewarding. So the combat experience is very hard to get used to, probably very, very difficult to master. This is a competitive game, but when you really get used to it and get good at it, it's really rewarding. Okay, now I want to talk about what bugged me with the game. First off, I have to mention the camera angles are not the best. Usually it's okay, but sometimes the camera does spaz out and jump off in a random direction. But when you go up staircases, especially things like spiral staircases or anything that resembles something like that, small enclosed areas going around in circles, you can't see anything. You can't really see your character, you can't see where you're going, and it gets really confusing. And if you get into a fight on a spiral staircase, well, you just can't. You have to get out of the staircase first before you can do anything. The camera angles are a little awkward. especially in closed spaces. But for most of the game, it is pretty open. Like even indoors, there's usually pretty large spaces indoors. So it's not always a problem, but when you're in those tight spaces, you don't really want to get into a fight. Then, of course, there's the particle effects. Now, they look really pretty if it's like just a couple people, if it's like one-on-one or maybe 3 or 4 people. The particle effects from spell casting and all of that looks pretty good. But in things like PvP or World v World, or even in PvE, when there's a lot of people in the same spot casting all these spells, it just becomes a massive flashy mess. You can't really see yourself, especially if you're a melee character and you jump right into the fight. You can't see what you're doing, you can't see who you're fighting, you can't see who you're hitting. There's just so much going on, so many effects going on. And it looks pretty, but it's not super functional. And I would like it if they toned it down. Some other YouTubers have said this before, and I hope they tone down the particle effects, because especially in competitive play, you don't want to lose because the graphics are in your way. The graphics are there to enhance the game, they're there to communicate what's going on in the game, to give you visual feedback. And if the graphics are hindering your read of what's going on, then they're not serving their purpose and really need to be toned down. That's why sometimes people do play games on the lowest graphical settings, because they don't want to see that stuff. They just want to see what is going on. They want to see exactly what's happening. So I hope they fix that. Now onto the actual gameplay itself. One thing I noticed, especially, I'm not sure if it's because I haven't played the game for long enough, but through the first phases of my storyline, especially the starter area, I only played the human starter area, but the characters didn't feel very memorable. Like, you were meeting these people along the way, but you didn't really connect with them. For example, you meet that woman really early on who gives you your first quest, and I don't even remember her name. And you do meet that military guy as well, and you help him defeat the big boss at the end. And you do meet him later on, but they don't really grab you really fast. Like, there are things that make a good character, and I'm not a fantastic character designer, but I can tell you which kinds of characters I remember. And for example, in StarCraft, when you meet Jim Raynor, when you meet Tassadar, when you meet Kerrigan or Emperor Mengsk, those characters grab you from the very start. You know, you just can't ignore them. They're just there and they're in your face, and they're such huge personalities that you can't let go of them. You know that they're important. But in Guild Wars 2, when you meet these characters, they seem a little, they're not really concerned with you, really. And you don't really feel concerned with them. Like, if they died, you'll be, it's no big deal. I mean, it could even be by mistake when some people make a good character, or a memorable character, rather. For example, in Morrowind, at the very beginning of Morrowind, you meet Fargath. Now, he's just an NPC who gives you a very simple quest just to get his ring that was taken by the guards, and you return it to him. But he became one of the most iconic characters from Morrowind, simply because of one of his lines where once you get his ring for him, he really likes you, and he says this line, something along the lines of, "I have a feeling that you and I are about to become very close." And it was just so creepy and so stalkery, and it just felt so awkward, but it felt so unique. And everyone remembers Fargath. Even though he's just this nobody NPC character, he doesn't do anything else during the rest of the game. He just has that one line, and people pick up on it. So there are these key things which I don't know how to purposefully create, but they do exist, on how a character can grab you and hold on to you. And when you lose them, you feel for them. And I don't get that from the characters in Guild Wars 2. Not yet, anyway. Now finally, what I feel is still lacking from the game is they have hyped up very much on how your character and how you will feel unique. You are your own hero, and your story is your story and no one else's. But you don't really get that feeling so far. It could be because it's in beta and everyone is crowded into the same areas, but you just seem to go through the same starting area regardless of what happens. I haven't encountered any major decision so far that leads to a death of a friend or anything really permanent. Not yet anyway. For example, once you finish the starter area, you're put into this little house in Queensdale, and you just feel like you're part of the mass. There's just all these people around doing exactly the same thing as you. And it's most likely because it was beta, and everyone was crowded into the few cities that were available and the few areas that were available. I have a feeling that once the world opens up and everyone's allowed to roam free, and not everyone is in the starter areas, because once you start to level up, you will spread out across the world. I have a feeling that once that happens, your story and everyone's stories will start to divert a bit more. But in the starting area, especially in the beta, you don't really get the feeling of uniqueness. So I do hope these things are resolved when the game finally goes into the final release. Alright, and just as a bonus, in case you didn't know, this Monday, they're going to have a surprise stress test. So anyone of you who have pre-purchased, you're going to be able to get another chance to play the game. And this doesn't count as a beta weekend, so it's an extra one. So if you have some time this Monday, check out the times. You can Google it or watch my other news videos or whatever. And play the game some more. Alright, that's my opinion so far on what's right and wrong with Guild Wars 2, and it's still an amazing game. It's still the best MMORPG I've ever played, and that's all I have to say. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.